All right, here's that moment of truth. That moment of truth where I wait for the internet to wake up and to tell me that we're going to be okay. And YouTube, it looks like you're awake. Let's see. Rockfin, are you up? Rockfin woke up first. It's not a competition, internet. It's not a competition, but if it is, Rockfin won today. Rockfin was a little quicker. YouTube, you're slow on the upkeep. What's up, everybody? What is up, everybody? Good afternoon to all my East Coasters. Good morning to all my fellow West Coasters. And good evening if you're in an evening time zone. It's Monday. I just stumbled over the times of day. And if you're in the future, Australia, New Zealand, remember, you have a job. You need to fix climate change and then tell the rest of us what the secret is. Just text me the solution. I'll be waiting. You have a day, an extra day of science. You're in the future. See how that works? Special thanks to everyone who makes the show possible. Our friends over at Indie Left. Indie Left is the only place to get all of the content from all the streamers and article writers you know and love. They have a platform that gets updated twice a day. To find out everything they got going on and to subscribe to their Discord community, you can check them out at independentleft.media. That is independentleft.media. And I want to tell you about an exciting event this month that's going to be happening on May 22nd. That's Saturday, May 22nd. It is the U.S. Solutions Summit. The U.S. Solutions Summit will be streaming live on May 22nd on KRTD Media on YouTube and all the socials, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. There's 6 panels. There is a star-studded panelist lineup, including me. I don't know why they picked me, but they needed some dead weight, so I'm part of it. Also, though, Graham Elwood, Justin Jackson, The Convo Cal, Hard Lens Media, and more than a dozen others. You will not want to miss this. It's really excited. I'm stoked to be part of it. Go to US Solutions Summit, and that's 2 S's there. So US and then solutionssummit.com to sign up for email updates about the event. And I'll see you all on May 22nd. All right, without further ado, I'm really excited about my guests today. We have 2 guests. And we have a special episode. As you know, or as you likely know, tomorrow will be the 51st anniversary of the Kent State Massacre, which was the occurrence where 4 students were murdered by the National Guard for protesting the Vietnam War. And here to talk about it today and give us some updates on what's been happening since, we have not 1, but 2 activists. We have Mike Alewitz out in Connecticut, and we have Laurel Krause, whose sister, Allison Krause, was among those murdered at Kent State so many years ago. Mike and Laurel, how are you? Thanks so much for being here with me.
Thank you, Ron. Hi, Laurel.
I'm good.
Good to see you. And I guess we'll also share this little fun nugget now in the theme of, wow, what a small world it is. Laurel and I learned this a little while ago that her sister, Allison, and my cousin, Joe, went to a dance together when they were both in high school.
Was Kevin Bacon there?
Maybe. I don't think he's from Western Pennsylvania. Or is he? I know he. Well, anyway. So thank you for being here. Good to see you both. And so let's start at the beginning. Laurel, you have been very active about this issue pretty much since it happened. So what has that journey been like for you? What has it been like to, I'd imagine on a daily basis, you're reminded of your sister and losing your sister, but yet you have, done all of these events and done all this activism to, search for the truth and keep her memory alive.
Well, Allison was 19 when she was killed. And just about 2 weeks ago, we celebrated her 70th birthday. And I realized how little has been done and how little truth is in this story about Kent State. That it's been 51 years of the government not telling the truth about what they did to my sister and her friends who were protesting the Vietnam War. 51 years of government refusing to take any acknowledgement of what they did and actually look at it with truth in the picture. Instead, it's become something that they have to rewrite and never really address that for protesters or students and protesters were killed that day, and it's illegal to kill for a government to kill protesters. And so here I am 51 years later. I took this to the United Nations in 2014, and we're going back soon. I learned that this was targeted assassinations, also known as extrajudicial execution. And from what we've been able to understand here is the CIA doesn't want Americans considering that protesters at Kent State and Jackson State, which both happened May 1970, that the two massacres were extrajudicial execution and targeted assassination.
So, and I think some of the irony going on, especially today, as of all days, today is supposedly Press Freedom Day throughout the world. It's World Press Freedom Day, which, I tweeted this out. I was just saying, well, friendly reminder, you look at everything going on around the world. Julian Assange is still in prison. Edward Snowden received no pardon. Non-corporate media is stifled on a daily basis. And in any press freedom index that's worth a damn, the United States barely ranks in the top 50. So we have a very sad history, when it comes to this type of thing, and that of course bleeds into people's rights to protest. So let's talk about last year, because last year was the 50th anniversary. And, of course, like with the pandemic, that kind of made it just a weird, a very odd place in the world for everybody. But kind of what was that like for you hitting the 50th? And did you feel a sense of accomplishment, or did you feel a sense of like, how have we not evolved further than this? Or was it just bittersweet? Like, what was that like for you going through the 50th?
Well, we were closed out at Kent State University. They didn't want survivors participating. We're not allowed to participate. And so at the last minute, I put together the Kent State 50th teach-in with Mickey Huff of Project Censor. And, we did our best. It was with Kent State University working against us, and specifically the CIA. And it's hard to describe what they've done, but they want the Kent State story to be a certain way, and it deviates from the truth. And, I founded the Kent State Truth Tribunal with Emily Kunstler. We're involved in the business of truth. So when Kent State University doesn't want the truth in their recollection and their museum, they spent millions on this. When they don't include our truth and survivor truth into the narrative, it makes it troubling. And I have to live with that. It's hard. But I'm still going for it. And I know that truth will out here. It always does.
So, Mike, I'd like you to weigh in on this, and both of you, please weigh in. But what is when you bring up how Kent State and some of the powers that be, that they do still acknowledge this every year, but they kind of do it in a very a very selective way. Can you go into detail about that, Mike? I know you've written about this more extensively. Could you guys kind of unpack what exactly is going on there?
Well, the thing is that for 50 years, over 50 years, basically the mass anti-war movement has been written out of the history of what happened at Kent. In Kent, there were mobilizations of thousands of students before the invasion of Cambodia. And then when the invasion of Cambodia took place, when Nixon announced the invasion of Cambodia on April 30th of 1970, there was a massive student strike that began and then was fueled by the additional shootings at Kent and Jackson. Over 400 campuses across the country shut down and were occupied. There were mass mobilizations in the street. Millions of people demonstrated. And the event was one of those that had a profound effect, particularly within the armed forces where there was a growing anti-war movement. And eventually, really, it was the collapse of the army in Southeast Asia that forced the U.S. to withdraw the troops. That history, that idea, that power that comes out of the mass movement is what they don't want to be popularized. They don't want people to understand that. They don't want that to be part of the commemoration at Kent. They don't want it to be part of the history in the media. They want to wipe out what we in our millions accomplished, because they are still doing these things. They are still waging war across the globe. And what they fear more than anything is a rebirth of the mass anti-war movement, which challenges their authority. So the Kent piece, which Laurel and I happen to be involved in because of fate, as has it, but really it's just one part of this giant picture of attempting to rewrite history, suppress history. They do it with the civil rights movement. They do it with the anti-war movement. They do it with the women's liberation movement. They do it with the gay movement. The ruling class of this country wants us to forget the fact that we have the ability to change history. That is what's important to them.
I don't mean to step on you, but those movements were all protest, and that's the link. And so when we look at what they're doing in Kent State, they're talking about protesters as activists. And when someone goes out and they claim that they're an activist and they go and protest, they don't have the same kind of protections that a full-fledged I learned this by going to the United Nations in 2014. They taught me that protesters have protection, especially when it's the government killing or even hurting or harassing protesters. So when a government kills a protester, there's supposed to be a real high level of investigation and impartial investigation. There needs to be a making of amends and correcting the history of what happened. None of this has been possible in the United States. And we see the way that they're crafting the website at Kent State is to take the word protester out. There's no mention of protesters, very, very little.
What do they say instead?
Activist.
Oh.
And activist has zero protection. They want more people out there in the streets without protection. That's the bottom line here.
Throughout this journey for you, what has been, and this is directed to both of you, what has been kind of the most outrageous thing that you've seen, especially as far as like a peek under the hood, where you really just thought, wow, this is a scary state of affairs right here?
Well, I have to admit that placing Stephanie Daines in charge of the commemoration over the last few years is pretty astounding.
So unpack that, because I'm sure a lot of people aren't aware. I mean, I've read your piece, but for anyone who hasn't, what's going on there?
Stephanie Daines Smith was one of the central leaders of the Central Intelligence Agency. She was in charge of the largest section of the Central Intelligence Agency. She worked with Condoleezza Rice when Rice, John Ashcroft, and Dick Cheney were literally planning on the table.
What a crew. What a crew. Wouldn't you want to be at that party?
How to torture people in Iraq and in black ops sites around the world. And this included waterboarding, sexual assault, all kinds of horrible things that went on. And for those who've been around for a few years, you know what happened. Now, the idea that you name this person to head a commemoration of the Kent Massacre is pretty astounding. Now, of course, it's been 50 years of this kind of stuff, but most universities have enough sense not to do something like that. Now, how this woman even got on the faculty is beyond me. But so
what does she do on the faculty? What is her position exactly?
She's a professor of journalism. She came to Kent State in 2011. She was brought in after the commands to fire were isolated in the Kent State massacre. I believe that she was brought in to, what is that, her saying, Mike?
Get there first and clean up your roadkill later.
That's her saying.
Ron's head is going to explode. Yeah, I mean,
well, you know, this is just to like mention just a fun aside here. Like this is why, especially as a comedian in Los Angeles, this is why you don't see a ton of dystopian stuff come out anymore, because it's like truth is stranger than fiction. I couldn't pitch this and it would get picked up. I'm like, no, seriously. An anti-war commemoration is going to be run by this CIA person who has helped facilitate warmongering around the world for years and years and years. And oh, by the way, they teach journalism. That's too. Come on, who's going to believe that?
Well, of course, we all know that the CIA is a citadel of accurate news production, right? I mean, the whole thing is. Yeah, how could you make it any weirder? It would be impossible.
Right.
And so you take a person who has basically been an architect of thousands of Kent States all over the world, because Kent State is an anomaly in the United States. In the United States, really, in order to placate the working class, they don't just simply go in and gun everybody down the way that the CIA has done in other countries around the world. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm a muralist, I've traveled around the world. You go to Nicaragua or you go to the Middle East, you go to these places, Kent State is a daily occurrence. And this stuff is a conscious U.S. policy, and it's directed by people like this woman. And the idea that you then take somebody who's created thousands of Kent States and you put them in charge of a memorial that's supposed to honor these people.
May I interrupt? She wrote the CIA torture report. She was one of the key authors. Now, you have to remember, we've never had access to the CIA torture report. Instead, Congress rewrote it, and the report we got was redacted, even the Congress report. So you get very little accountability in the torture report. But I think she did such a great job that she got the Kent State report, and that's what she's doing.
So where do you see, like as far as where we're at now as a society, do you think we've gone backwards? Do you think we've gone forwards? Like, what is that like in your eyes now, as far as the state of protesting, as far as civil unrest, police brutality, and all of it? Where do you think we're at now?
You take it.
Well, a lot of people think that things have gotten worse in this country because they see all this stuff. They see the police murders that occur daily, and they see this what the U.S. is involved in. But in reality, the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, totally transformed the thinking of people in the United States. Before Vietnam, well, it began in Korea, but really Vietnam was a big turning point. World War I, World War II, they marched the troops down the street and they had parades and people came out and young men couldn't wait to sign up and go fight. And the anti-war movement, the defeat of the strongest imperial power in the world in the midst of a fighting war, was an unbelievable historic event. And they have tried to turn that around. They have tried to use their media, to use their propaganda to convince the American people that these wars are worthwhile and stuff. And they failed. That's part of the legacy of Kent and Jackson and the National Student Strike and the anti-war movement in the Army. Fact of the matter is, the American people are more anti-war than they have ever been. And that is a wonderful thing. And in fact, they're also more opposed to racist assaults because for the first time, people are seeing it thanks to, the fact that people have cameras in their pocket. It's not like this wasn't going on before. In fact, more of it was going on before, but now because people can see it, it's become more of a reality. So I think that the world has been transformed by the social movements of the 1970s. I'm old enough to have lived before there was a women's movement, before there was a gay movement, before these movements totally transformed the way people think. And let me tell you, it was a lot worse back then. Things are much better in that respect. Now, whether we can transform the world enough before they take us down the crapper with their carbon-based insanity is another question. But I do think there are going to be some tremendous fightbacks coming ahead that are going to make the 60s and the 70s look pretty tame by comparison. Because the problems are much worse now.
Peter Coyote said, that we won the cultural wars, and we did. And that's your dissertation that you just said. But like I said, just to bring it back, Allison was 19 when she was killed, and she's 70 now. And over this 51 years, there's been little progress in protest protection and just the right to protest. It's been taken away more and more and more. And so this year, for the 51st, I decided to write Allison a letter and celebrate her call for love and peace. And that's where I'm going this 51st, because I'm sick of complaining about Kent State University and making it about them. The Kent State Massacre was about peace. That part of this is not talked about. And that's what my sister Allison died for.
So, I mean, so I guess, like, in summary, y'all are saying that, while there has been a mass awakening amidst people over the years, there's still this very, very blatant, at times via force, at times, in my opinion, just a mass distraction, by the power to kind of keep all of this under their thumb. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, there's a class struggle that's going on, and it goes on every day. It goes on in the workplace. It goes on in the streets, and movements have ups and downs. We saw a big upsurge of political action around Me Too. We saw a big upsurge in political action around Black Lives Matter, massive anti-racist demonstrations. The defeat in Southeast Asia, the defeat of the U.S. Military in Southeast Asia, forced them to rethink how they conduct wars. So what we have is permanent war, but what they do is try to keep it under the radar. They keep it out of the news. You have a lot of high-tech weaponry and bombing. They've been unable to successfully occupy countries. They can't. They're pulling out of Afghanistan. They can't hold these places. So they've really suffered a tremendous amount in terms of what they are able to do militarily. But the greatest weapons that they have are not military weapons. The greatest weapons they had are what they do to get people to think a certain way. They try to get people to think we're special because we're Americans, which is not true. We're workers. Only time you're an American is when they want you to go fight their wars or pay taxes or whatever. But really what you are is you're workers. You're part of a working class. You're no different than workers in Afghanistan and Iraq and in the Sudan and in, all of the countries that they demonize. Your workers in North Korea. And we have more in common with them than we do with the ruling class of this country, billionaires who profit off of worldwide slaughter. They are billionaires because of a system that is responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people and it kills people every day. That's the fight. And the fight today is much more important even than it was in 1970 when a lot more of us were in the streets at the moment. But we're going to have to fight for the survival of the human species. There's either going to be socialism, there's either going to be a revolution, there's going to be establishment of a society based on human needs, or we're going to continue to see the destruction of the planet, or at least in terms of a planet that can support human life. Those are the stakes involved for young people today. It's not just about ending a war. It's not about ending racism. Those are very important struggles. But we're also going to have to fight for human survival. Either we will have solidarity with other human beings, or we will drown in blood. That's the choice, socialism or barbarism. And so, this is why we all have to do what we can. This is why whatever you can contribute to the movement, that's what we need to do.
Laurel?
I don't have anything to add. I think that Mike is really good at this.
You're very kind, Laurel.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is a little bit of a lighter turn here. And Laurel, I want you to weigh in first. Where do you kind of get your hope and optimism from? Like where do you see it in other human beings, and where do you just see it in the world, especially throughout this journey that you've been on 51 years now?
Well, I'm not just a political person. I go into spirit quite a bit, and when I do that, I get to connect with my sister, and so it's one of the best places I go. And I wrote that letter to Allison with that in mind. I think that her message this 51st is love and peace. I mean, the day before she died, she said, "What's the matter with peace? Flowers are better than bullets." And that first part, it really sticks in my craw these days, because what is the matter with peace? I mean, What's the problem? Why do we used to have 3 emojis for peace on Facebook. They took one away. I mean, we're not allowed to think about peace or spend any time around peace or celebrate peace. No conversation. So that's where I think, I think there's a human urge for peace. And I think people are connecting with it. And the fact that there's nowhere to go except for us, people that are fostering peace and love and healing. Because when you don't allow peace into stories like Kent State, there's no healing. And that's on the collective basis as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. If war was in any way natural, it wouldn't take, years and years and years of propaganda from the most powerful entities in the world to get it to happen. It would just, it would just be more of a natural thing, and it isn't. So, but
war is the most polluting act on the world.
And this is the problem, Ron, that the U.S. has today, because in order to be victorious in what they're trying to do in the Middle East and what they're trying to do around the world, you have to occupy these countries. And they are no longer able to occupy these countries, because what happens is that people see when they're on the ground, it's not like you're dropping a bomb from a mile up in the air. You're actually facing other human beings.
Right.
And this is exactly what happened in Vietnam. And it was led by Black and Latino soldiers. It was very organic. It was organized from the ground up. Now, a lot of us were in the anti-war movement, were involved in reaching out to GIs on the bases here in the U.S. and helping to facilitate the movement in the Army. But it really was a rank and file movement led by Black and Latino soldiers in Vietnam that began to realize that they had more in common with the people that they were supposed to kill than they did with their own officers, that they did with the ruling class of their own country. And the army began to collapse. Soldiers refused to follow orders. There's a wonderful film called Sir, No Sir. I would encourage everyone to see that film, which shows about the anti-war movement in the army. And this is the problem that the ruling class of this country has today, because they're unable to win a war. And it is only through military might that the U.S. is able to maintain its preeminent place in the world imperialist structure. So as weak and confused as our movement may seem at times, and we are human beings, so it often may look like that, but in reality, the ruling class of this country is scared and weak. And they would like us to not realize that. But in fact, that's true. If you read about how these super rich people are buying islands and preparing to go escape and stuff, they're terrified. When they look out the window and they see Black Lives Matter protesters, they think they're about to lose everything. And in a sense, they're right, because this is the beginning. Once these protests, which are taking place here and there, become generalized, and once the working class as a whole becomes involved in these things, then their power is going to be very limited. And that, by the way, is why they're making little peeping noises about having social programs. That's why they're giving us $600 or $1,400. That's why they're saying, well, we're going to throw money at this or that. They're afraid. They're afraid, and they should be.
Well, the pitchforks are coming, and they know it. And the film that you mentioned, Sir No Sirs, by David Zeiger, and it's an excellent film.
So I want to ask this in closing here, and I'd like you both to answer, but I'll direct the question for you, Laurel. What is the best way to honor your sister's memory?
Create ways for us to have greater love and peace in our world. That's how you honor my sister. And do it in your own life. And if more of us do this in our own life, it starts, becoming in everyone's life. And that's how movements start. It starts with individuals and it goes to the collective. And peace has a power of its own. You connect with it, you plug in, and it becomes a whole new way of seeing the world.
And if I can take off from there a little bit, what we can all do, I believe, is help to rebuild an anti-war movement that opposes all U.S. wars and occupations, that opposes the racist violence that's going on today, that helps to empower people who are lacking power, that helps to tear down the walls that they try to build between working people in this country and other countries, to whip away the veil of secrecy and lies that they put around all of the activities that we're engaged in, and to build human solidarity. Human solidarity, building solidarity among working people around the world. There is no force that can stand up to that. That's what we have to do. That's the task. That, in my opinion, is the way to honor the martyrs of Kent and Augusta and Jackson. And what they're doing at Kent has little to do with that. What you have going on at Kent is an attempt to turn anti-war sentiment into a kind of self-indulgent, self-promotional thing.
Anti-American.
That removes people from political activity and makes them spectators and people that have no power. And what we all can do is we can get in the streets, we can march. We're one of millions, and that's how you change the world.
So, first of all, thank you guys so much for doing everything you do, and thank you so much. I'm glad we were finally able to collaborate on a show here. And I guess in closing, please let people know where they can learn more about everything you both have going on. Laurel, where they can learn more about.
Well, first, I want to thank you for doing the Get Your News On with Ron on Stephanie Dane Smith. That was back in, I think, May 2019. If folks want to go look at that, you should put it in the link here, because it was a great show. I watched it this morning and I got a good giggle. But people can take a look at our new website. We just relaunched. It's www.truthtribunal.org. And the letter to Allison is there, along with a lot of really great research and truth about Kent State you won't find anywhere else.
Yeah,
and
thank
Mike,
you.
Where can people go to read some of your stuff, Mike?
Huh?
Where can people go? Because I know you have some writing out there. Tell people where they can go to find some of it.
Well, today there's a piece in at Common Dreams, and if you Google me, you can find stuff. And I post on my Facebook page. For me, Kent, as much as it affected me, and it was a profound thing to lose a close friend and other friends who were injured, and to go through all that. And I was very active in the anti-war movement when it happened. But my life didn't stop on that day. And I've seen, the same kind of tragic results of U.S. foreign policy in the places I've gone. When I worked in Nicaragua, where every family had someone who'd been tortured, where you go to these places and see this, and yet you see people carrying on and helping to re-knit solidarity and build an international movement. And so we can all do that. And we can share ideas. As you can tell, Laurel is very California in her approach. And I love her for that. She has been doing great work for a long time and been taking a lot of crap for it. So she's to be congratulated. And Ron, when I saw your thing last year, I got to tell you, it wasn't just because you quoted me, but your outrage was very refreshing to see. I mean,
Fantastic.
it was.
Well, thank you very much. And everyone listening, please check out truthtribunal.org and check out Mike's work over at Common Dreams. And thank you, both of you, so much for everything you do. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow, and Mike says peace, and Laurel says peace, and I say peace. And we'll see you next time. Peace, everybody.